Alright, I wanted to do a quick video on a couple of wired Switch controllers that I got. This one's by a brand called PowerA. And this one's a brand called, I don't even know how to pronounce that, Hori? H-O-R-I. Anyways, I'm just going to call this one Big Red, and this one the Pikachu controller. I'm going to kind of start with the conclusion. If you're somebody with fairly large hands, you're going to prefer Big Red. 9 times out of 10. It is shaped more like an Xbox controller. So if you're somebody that is used to playing with an Xbox controller and you want something for your Switch, this is almost hands down going to be the winner. You'll feel right at home picking this thing up. The way it's shaped and the overall size of it is very, very similar to an Xbox controller. If you like the shape and size of the Switch Pro controller, then you'll probably prefer the PowerA controller. One thing about this one, which was a little disappointing, was when it arrived, there's almost a hairline fracture in the logo here, and then a little nick in the bottom. It was marked as brand new, but it kind of looked like it was used when it showed up. The replacement's on the way, so I'm assuming and hoping that it'll be completely fine. As far as features go, like I said, these are both wired controllers. You give up amiibo support, you give up rumble, and you give up motion controls. So if those are anything you want, you're probably going to want to just get the Switch Pro controller. Both of these brands, I do believe, make regular wireless controllers, but you're only going to save about $20, and they don't have rumble. So at the end of the day, I'd say, yeah, you might as well just get the Pro controller if you want wireless and you want rumble. As far as kind of weird other features go, there's a 3.5mm jack at the bottom of this one. Not that I'm going to be, I'm not going to be playing intense online games on the Switch. That's just bizarre to me. There's also 2 programmable buttons on the bottom of this, which, depending on how you hold the controller, for me, those are my middle fingers that are pressing those buttons. So you can program it for your A, B, X, Y. You can program it for, I think you can program it for your bumpers or your triggers. But, yeah, nice feature if that's something you're interested in. I did not like, there's a very bright white LED here on this controller. You could just cover it with a piece of tape, but if I was playing in a dark room or something like that, this would probably be quite distracting. But I can just grab a piece of tape and cover it up if I really cared a lot about that. This controller has a turbo feature, which I never really use, and it turns on a green LED here, but it is nowhere near as invasive as this guy. So, yeah, little green LED for turbo if you feel like turning that on. They both still have your plus minus home and screenshot button. And then the cable, that's another difference. The cable's a very similar length. I want to say 10 feet-ish. I'd have to look that up again. But this one has removable cable. So if somebody trips over your cable while you're playing a game, it'll hopefully rip it out of the controller instead of ripping your Switch dock off the entertainment unit. Whereas this guy, that's in there. That's not coming out. It might come out, but it's not going back in. So that's definitely a point in favor of this guy. What else? I've got size written down, and yeah, I already went over the size. That's all a matter of preference, like I mentioned. If you like the Xbox controller, this guy. If you like the Switch Pro controller, this guy. The joysticks. These joysticks are a little more stiff, if I can say that. It's not uncomfortably stiff by any means, but they're definitely more stiff than most controllers I'm used to. These feel shockingly similar to Xbox joysticks. As far as how much resistance, and even in the click in them, these joysticks feel fantastic. Like I said, the click, not bad on this guy. The click on this one, very clicky, very loud. You wouldn't really know that unless you compared them head to head, but yeah, very clicky joysticks on this guy. Your A, B, X, and Y buttons. in my opinion, I prefer it on this controller. There's not as much of a travel. They're fairly mushy, so they don't have that really cheap clicking feeling to them, which is good. This one also doesn't have that. It's a different kind of click. I don't really know how to describe it. It's a little bit harder of a click, if I can call it that, and there's more of a travel to get all the way to the bottom. Once again, unless you had them both side by side, you probably wouldn't really notice or care. But, yeah, something maybe to consider. Moving on to the D-pad, I flat out prefer this one. It feels very similar to the Switch Pro controller. It's got that, I guess, mushy feeling, if I can call it that. When you compare it to an Xbox, I've never really liked this D-pad. It's very clicky. And then you can do it, yeah, compared to the, yeah, this is a very smooth, almost mushy D-pad, which to me feels better. It's all a matter of preference. This one, I would almost say is even mushier. It's almost similar to a Super Nintendo controller in terms of how mushy it feels. You can also remove the D-pad. Then there's individual buttons down here. I don't really like the individual buttons. I've looked up reviews that some people say they love them. The buttons actually feel... They almost feel mushy like a GameCube controller. Which I definitely like. Like these buttons, anyway, as far as buttons go, I really, those are fine. Those are alright. Put this back on there. Yeah, the problem with them is that if you're not going to use the D-pad, they're kind of sunken in on the controller. So if you're playing a game normally, you almost expect to press like right about here, but you've got to sink your thumb in further down to press these buttons, which, you know, in the middle of a game after about 5 minutes, you probably wouldn't notice, but upon first time picking up the controller, you definitely notice it. So for me, I prefer to have the D-pad installed on it. Last two things I have written down are the bumpers. So on this one, there's a... I've had some aftermarket GameCube controllers that have a very, very unsatisfying and very clicky Z button, or Z, depending on which side of the border you're on. These are definitely better than that, but they almost have a hollow click to them, if that makes any sense. I definitely prefer these bumpers. It almost sounds like I'm kind of knocking on this controller, but it's really not bad. Yeah, these bumpers are better. Much more comparable to the original controller. And I guess in a sense these have a little more click to them, and that's much more similar to this guy. These are much harder click, which I never really noticed until comparing it to a couple other controllers, but you're not the focus today. And then the last thing I've written down is the triggers. Oh, the triggers. I mean, it's Nintendo's fault for not having full traverse triggers, so it's not really either of these brands' fault for that. I prefer these triggers, flat out. They're just better triggers because the shape of these, it almost feels like they're fighting your fingers. Your finger almost wants to slip off of them. It's very odd it's hard to describe unless you actually pick up the controller and feel it, but they are not shaped in a way that really hug your fingers, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I definitely prefer the triggers on this guy. But yeah, long story short, if you like the Switch Pro controller, here's your guy. If you got big hands and you're an adult, here's your guy. Now, if you have any questions, leave them down below, and thanks for watching.